people that have a favorable hat, those are the guys you lose money to, okay?
Okay.
You understand?
Seems fair.
Favorable hat, favorable hat. Okay, thank you. Thanks for being a good sport.
Got it.
Alright guys, meetup games underway here at Graton Casino Poker Room. Great poker room here. Super comfortable. Everything about this casino just on point, and I probably don't need to mention that they spoil us. You might have seen me in such vlogs as the one where I flew my drone in the hotel room. Yeah, they got us back in that ridiculous suite here. They just spoil us here, so just gonna be here as much as I can, as long as they're willing to. Action's underway. I'm in a 3-5 game. There's already like 6 3-5 games running in the poker room. There was like 133 people on the list, which is just nutso. Action is already underway. Let's see, I got into a bomb pot situation. There's a double board bomb pot where I had the 10-7 of spades. Action checks all the way through on the flops. I don't have much of anything on the flop. I think I have 2 gut shots, or a pair and a gut shot. On the top board I make 2 pair, and on the bottom board I make a double gutter now. So there's a bet of $100 in early position. The player on my right calls. Could be too light of a call, but I make it anyway, and there's another call behind me. On the river cards we do not improve, and it checks all the way to the last player, who puts out a bet of the maximum. He shams all in. The player who is in early position calls all in, folds over to me, just gonna have to fold here now, and the player in last position ends up with a full house on one board and a straight on the other board. So good hand, Mr. Jean-Francois, the winner of the costume contest in South Point. He just does it all. He wins wearing costumes, he wins in double board bomb pots. He's got it all going. His name is Jean-Francois as well. I mean, what a name, what a guy. All right, so we lose that hand, and then let's see what else happened. There's another hand where Jean-Francois, once again, opens from under the gun, $30, I think. I think there's a straddle on. We've been playing a lot of 3-5-10 here in this game so far. So I think he opens for $30. There's a call, and I call with Jack-9 of diamonds in late position. Flop ourselves a flush draw on an ace-high board. Action checks over to me. I have good equity here, no showdown value, so I put out a bet. I think I bet $40. Mr. Jean-Francois puts in the check raise up to $100. Folds back to me. Obviously can't call. Obviously can't fold for that price. Turns another ace, really bad card. He checks. I check it back. River, we make a pair of jacks, but he puts out another bet. I don't think we are good here often enough after he check raises an ace-high board, and he's the initial raiser from under the gun. So I fold, and then I don't think I got it on video, but he shows us pocket 10s for flop set. Turn boat. Good thing we only improved to a pair of jacks rather than a flush on the river. So we avoid a potential disaster there, but stuck in the early going. Plenty of time though. It's only 3:08 in the PM. I'm only on the first table here. Let's see if we can turn this around, head the other direction. All right guys, diving back into the action here. I just switched tables, but we have a few quick hands to look at on the first table that I was at. In the first one, there's a middle position limp. We looked down at 6-4 clubs. Not the most premium of hands, but in a meetup game, very playable. So I'm gonna attempt to isolate here. I raised it up to $25. The button, the small blind, and the limper call. So isolation play fail. However, when the flop comes down ace-king high with one club, very good flop for us, even though we don't directly connect. This kind of flop favors us big time. So after they check it over to me, I'm gonna bet around half pot, $55. Some barreling opportunities on some backdoor clubs, or just keep the foot on the gas. But luckily it doesn't come to that. Doesn't need to come to that. They all fold. So we take it down there with 6 high. In this next hand, action folds over to me in middle position, looking down at pocket 4s. I make it $20 to go. Folds over to Mr. Jean-Francois in the big blind, and he min 3-bets it to $40. Okay, maybe not min. 35 would be min 3-bet, but he doubles our bet, $40 3-bet out of position. I told him we need to have a little bit of a chat about his 3-bet sizings. Anyway, for $40, $20 more, I'm not gonna fold. So I make a call, we go heads up to a flop, which comes queen high. This time he checks it over me, and I tell him that I've seen this situation before. I've seen this play out before. Where you check raise me. Turn is a 10, he checks. Just gonna keep checking it down here. River's a jack, which is a very bad card because now we lose to ace king as well. He checks again, I check it back, and he shows us pocket queens. See? Live and learn, Jean-Francois. I'm on to you. I've seen that movie before. And in this next hand, the hijack opens it for $15. The cutoff calls. We look down at ace-3 of clubs on the button. Ace blocker, wheel ability, flush ability, 3-bet time. I make it $60 to go, and the initial raiser calls. So heads up to a flop which comes ace high with 2 hearts that I would always be pot controlling. But he's not gonna let us pot control. He leaves right out for $75. Can't do anything other than make the call. The turn is an offsuit king, and this time he checks it over to us. Now I'm going to go for that pot control. It's also a really good card because it allows for some chops, possibilities versus better aces. I check it back, we're off to a river card, which is another king. He checks it again, maybe some potential for some very thin value here, but maybe not. I just check it back, and he announces that he has a flush draw, a busted flush draw. So we scoop that one in. We get a little bit back. I think we're still stuck maybe about $100, if that. All right, calling it back, trying to call it back. Oh, I'm up 1 beer. Someone bought me a beer. Wait, yeah. I think beers are not free here, or are they? Not sure yet. Either way, 1 beer deep. Alright guys, over on a new table now and diving right into the action. Under the gun, looking down at 6-5 of hearts. Raise it up to $20. Could possibly go ahead and fold this hand, but I think it's okay. I think in most 2-5 lineups, it's probably gonna be okay. I'm comfortable opening this hand. There's a call from the player 2 to my left. Player on the button puts in a 3-bet up to $80. Folds over to me, could probably fold this hand in a regular game. In a meetup game, can't really fold this hand. I go ahead and make the call. We're trying to give some action here in a meetup game, and it's definitely playable pre-flop. The player in between us makes the call as well, so 3 ways to a flop, which comes ace high, but with 2 hearts. I check, play in the middle checks, and action checks all the way through. The turn is a total brick, offsuit deuce. I'm gonna go ahead and lead out here. Downside to this is that there's not too many great cards on the river that I'm gonna be able to fire a shell into. I can try and set my own price. I don't want to check call here. I would much rather try and make a wager that I'm comfortable with rather than have to check call some medium to large bet. I bet $115 here, and I could probably even size down a little bit further, but I make it 115. The player on my left calls, and the player on the button holds. The river's an offsuit 4, and considering that we do not improve and we don't have blockers to any sort of strong hands, like any strong top pairs, I don't think I want to fire another barrel here on the river. I think I'm just going to go ahead and give it up. I go ahead and check it, and the player assembles a bet to the tune of $250, and obviously we fold. So I think obviously the main lesson here is could probably just fold to the 3-bet. Open is fine. With 6-5 suited out of position, probably just going to go ahead and fold that in a normal circumstance, but in a meetup game, gotta take it to the streets, you know? In this next hand, we have pocket 4s on the button, and there's an early raise, 3 calls before us, we call, and there's a call on the button. Big blind, I mean. We're going 5 ways to the flop here with pocket 4. Flop comes, king, queen, queen. Obviously no improvement for us, so once it checks over to me, I go ahead and check it back. The turn, however, is a little bit more favorable than that flop. It's a 4. There's a couple checks before a middle position player bets for $55. The player on his left calls, and it's a decision between flatting and raising here. I think there's a decent amount of time where a player will have slow played trips on the flop, and I think we want to try and pile some more money in here. We want to try and cooler a queen for the maximum. There will be some times where a player will have a club draw on this flop, and if he improves, if we let him improve on the river, then obviously that's great. You might suspect that they would bet those hands on the flop sometimes, rather than waiting to the turn to bet a flush draw. So anyway, as I said, I'm gonna try and cooler a queen for the maximum, and I raise it up here. Make it $180 to go. The action folds back to the player who bet the $55, and he folds. The player on his left thinks for a little while before folding as well. So no more action for us. Can't complain though. Scoop in another pot here. So we're seeing a lot of straddles in this meetup game, and in this hand I have the $10 straddle on, and the player on my left puts out a $20 straddle. So in this hand we are playing 3, 5, 10, 20. Action folds over to the player in the $5 blind. He calls the $20. We look down at 4 deuce offsuit in the $10 blind. Obviously a terrible hand, but we're gonna see if we can sneak in here for the 10 additional dollars. And the player in the $20 blind checks. So we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop comes down ace, 6, 5 with 2 diamonds, and after the player on my right checks, less likely that the player on my left would have an ace, otherwise he might raise it. I'm gonna go ahead and bet it here with this terrible hand and this gut shot. I bet $25, player on my left calls, and the player on my right calls. Pretty unsuccessful attempt by us, but things are looking up on the turn when it comes in offsuit 3. Player on my right checks. This time I ratcheted it up to $85. The player on my left disagrees with that price. He raises it up. He makes it an additional $200 on top, $285 total. Player on my right folds. Obviously we have to be a little bit worried here as there is one open-ender that got there, 7-4. But of course we're never gonna fold here to this single raise. We have ourselves a straight, not gonna go anywhere at this point. I make the call and we're off to a river card, which is another 4. So now there's 4 to a straight on the board. I go ahead and check it and my opponent bets $300. Now it's a little bit sketchy of a situation because there are some hands on the turn that my opponent could have been raising for value that we beat. Hands like a set or 2 pair. There's also some combo draws that could have improved on this river that got there, that we were ahead of on the turn as well. So with 4 to a straight on the board, there's a lot of those hands that we were beating that he could have been raising for value, such as sets and 2 pairs, that he would be skeptical of betting on the river. I'm not sure it's that great of a spot, but do we really want to fold a straight here? And how often could he have a hand other than, say, a hand like 7-4? I asked him if he happens to have 7-4. I announced that hand out loud, and he says he does not have 7-4, but he does have a good hand.
You just always have 7-4 here, right?
I'll be back. That's not a good sign. That's usually not a good sign when someone says that they don't have the hand that you announce. It's usually like, nope, I don't have that hand, but I do have a hand that probably has you beat.
What'd you make, 8s full?
I don't have a full house. And I don't have trips.
So after a lot of deliberation on my part, you guys know I hate folding rivers, especially when I have a hand as good as a straight. I decided to let it go. Do not pay off the $300. Turns out to be a good decision because my opponent shows us 9-7 of diamonds. So he did have himself a combo draw. He had the flush draw on the flop, turned himself a double gutter, lots of equity there, and that equity comes through. We end up with the worst hand on the river. We put money in when we were ahead on the turn. We were definitely not ahead on the flop with the 4 high. But anyway, made a good fold there on the river. Good hand to you, sir. In this next hand, we're looking down at King 10 of hearts. Gonna go ahead and raise it up to $20. Folds over to the big blind and puts in a 3-bet to $60. Since we are suited 40% of a royal flush, and it's only a 3x raise. If it was a little bit bigger of a raise, I might be tempted to let it go. But for 3x raise, play in position, 2 suited Broadway cards, I'm gonna make the call. So we go heads up to a flop, which comes down King high with 2 diamonds. Usually not a terrible flop for the 3-better, for the pre-flop aggressor, but my opponent checks it. I'm gonna go ahead and check it back here. If I had a better king, King Queen maybe, I would look to go for some value here, but with King 10, I'm gonna pot control on this street. The turn, however, is the 10 of diamonds. So even though it puts 3 diamonds on the board, when my opponent checks it over to me again, I'm gonna go for some value now. I bet $115 trying to get value from some hands like Ace Queen with a diamond. Don't think it's a good idea to size down there. So I bet $115 and my opponent calls. Off to a river, which is a 7 offsuit. Great card, total brick. Checks it over to me again. I'm gonna go for some more value here. I bet $180. I think that's maybe a little bit on the small side. I could size up there because there are some hands where I could have a single diamond myself. After he checks to me twice, I could have some bluffs. So I could definitely size up there, and I actually did think about sizing up. That was my first instinct. I wanted to bet a size where he would call more often, and I would just get paid off more often. So $180 does in fact get paid in this spot. He calls, we show, and he shows us pocket aces with the ace of diamonds. So I was never folding on the flop, so he somehow actually pot controls there, probably inadvertently. Pretty straightforward hand in the end, once we improved to 2 pair. Just gonna win us some money there. Not too long after that, there was a hand where I called a raise with pocket 10s in the middle position, 3 ways to a 9 high flop. We just call it down on 3 streets. We have an overpair. We have an overpair on this board. We're just gonna call it down three times, 3 streets, and it turns out my opponent has ace 9. So good news, things are rolling, things are clicking in this meetup game. How's your meetup game going?
Great. I didn't lose a dime.
That's good.
Always a great meetup
It's always
game.
good.
Yep.
Enjoying your time in California at Graton Casino?
Graton is great. Good cheesy.
That's very cheesy, yeah. That's super cheesy.
But it's good. Really.
Then it's good. All right, guys, we are at our 3rd table of the evening here. Straddle is on once again. There's a couple of limps. We look down at the best hand ever created in the history of humankind. 2 red aces. I make it $50 to go, and we see 4 callers. So a massively multi-way hand here with 2 aces. Little sketchy. Comes down, queen 4-4 with 2 hearts. Action checks over to me, definitely gonna bet it here. I think I can size down a little bit. I bet $85. The player on my left on the button calls, and the player in the straddle position check raises. He makes it $225. Folds back over to me, can't do anything other than make the call here. The player on my left calls once again. So, going 3 ways to a turn card, which shouldn't change too much. It's an offsuit jack. The player's not done betting though. He bets, I think around 240, 245. So it's not exactly a very big bet. What's also interesting in this hand is that we would expect, if this player has a 4, we would expect him to be suited. And if that's the case, which suited 4s would he normally have? He could have 4-5. Would he raise the flop with 4-5? He could have ace-4 suited. But if we look at our pocket aces and we look at this board, we have 2 red aces. So that's not very many combos. I think with that information, with that thought process, I think we should call one more time here. I'm definitely not loving it though, and I'm probably gonna have to fold to a river bet, especially so after the player on my left calls once again. So it's gonna be tough for one of these players to not have a 4 at this point. One of them could have a draw, but the other one's probably gonna have a 4. The river's a brick, doesn't change anything. The player in the straddle checks. I'm gonna check it back, trying to get to showdown here, and the player on my left checks. Makes me feel a little bit better, but only briefly, because the player in the straddle shows us 7-4 of clubs. So I guess I'm a little bit surprised. Definitely don't blame him for calling. A, it's a meetup game. B, he's invested $10 already in the straddle. C, he can make a straight flush. Maybe I project a little bit onto my opponent. Anyway, ace is cracked there. We lose a decent sized pot. It's the biggest loss of the night so far. In this next hand, we have ace queen offsuit under the gun, make it $20 to go. There's a player in middle position who puts in a 3-bet to $80, and it folds over to the big blinds, who makes a cold call. So ace queen offsuit is a hand that I will very often put into my 3-bet or 4-bet bluff range. I don't want to flat call here, play multi-way, out of position versus the aggressor with ace queen offsuit. If it was suited, I definitely wouldn't mind it, but offsuit, I like to put this hand into my my bluffing range. And especially being under the gun, I think we're gonna get a lot of credit a lot of the time. So I'm gonna put in the 4-bet here. I make it $320 to go. The player in middle position thinks for quite some time and then he lets it go. So that's good news. The player in the big blinds, he's kind of short stacked. He's only got about 500 or 525 in his stack. So if it comes to that, I'm not too worried about getting it in versus him. Just flat calling, just cold calling the 3-bet, he's usually not gonna be all that strong. Big blind player does in fact jam his stack in there, so we have no choice now. Definitely calling it off here. We're off to see all 5 cards, and the flop does not improve us. The turn does improve us in terms of giving us a double gutter. However, the river does not improve us. So we end up with ace queen high, and my opponent shows us pocket 4s. Can't do it. Cannot mow down the pocket 4s in a 4-bet, I guess 5-bet jam situation with those pocket 4s. You know, it's tough to make a pair in this game, this Texas Hold'em. Sometimes it is tough to make a pair. He gets it done. He scoops in a 4-figure pot with those pocket 4s. And we lose 2 medium to big hands back to back. things were rolling, things were going our way, and not so much at the moment. In this next hand, button straddle is back on. There's a couple of limps, and I look down at ace jack of diamonds. Once again, at 40% of a royal flush. And as it so happens, here at Graton Casino, a diamond royal is worth like $5,000 as far as a high hand bonus goes. So 40% of a diamond royal is like 80% of a typical royal, maybe more like 90%. Anyway, I make it 50 to go. Only the limper in the under the gun position makes the call. So heads up to a flop which comes 9-9-3 with 2 diamonds. He checks, I bet $40, he calls. Turn is favorable for us, guys. It's a 10 of diamonds. We improve to the nut flush. He checks, I bet 80 bucks. Once again, he makes the call. River is actually a bad card for us. It's an ace. So it's gonna be tough to get some value here. He checks it over to me. I'm gonna size down, at least compared to what I might bet if I'm really going for the jugular. I bet $115. It's gonna be tough for him to call here. Oftentimes he's gonna have a middling pair type of a hand. So after some deliberation, he does in fact fold. Yeah, just good flop, good turn. Not a great river for us. In this next hand, I have the straddle on. The under the gun player limps in, and the player next to him raises it up to $40. There's 2 callers, and it folds over to us in the straddle position, looking down at ace 10 offsuit. Again, it's kind of a similar situation to when I had that ace queen. Granted, we are not in the under the gun position, which is normally a stronger range. However, when the under the gun player limps in, the player who raised it up to $40, that can widen his range. Maybe not significantly, but at least somewhat. He's gonna try and ISO that limper some percentage of the time, I would imagine. We also have a blocker. We've got that ace ball. I'm gonna try and get after it here, put the squeeze play on. There's a lot of value out there with those 2 calls in the middle. So I raise it up, 3-bet it to $210. Only the raiser makes the call. The limper folds, the other 2 callers, they fold. Razor makes the call. So we're going heads up to a flop of king 9-5 rainbow, which is, again, a good flop for us. A flop that comes king high should be good for the aggressor. So I'm gonna put in a c-bet here, represent ace king, aces, kings, stuff like that. I bet $165, and that is good enough to get the job done and quickly. My opponent folds, and that's a good result. So we win the 210 from the 3-bet. We win $80 in callers, the limpers, $10, all sorts of dollars, just dollars. Dollars all over the place. We're scooping them in.
All right, guys, it is the next day here in this this ridiculous suite that Graton Casino hooks us up with. I tell you what, I could live in this suite. You know, I wouldn't mind just moving in here if they would have me. I guess that's a big if. Yeah, I sort of ran out of steam as far as the recording goes last night. I was exhausted. We started the meetup game at 2 p.m. I finished playing around midnight and then made it over to the lobby bar to have a couple drinks with a couple of the blog watchers that came out to play with us. I was spent, and you know, it's hard to probably picture or understand, but trying to do everything is pretty exhausting. And by everything, I mean grinding, playing, interacting with people, having a couple drinks along the way, and talking into this camera about some hands that unfold and trying to, like, you know, talk about them in a clear and concise way that you guys will actually get some value out of. That can be pretty exhausting. It's funny because, you know, there's only like a couple of us vloggers that record these videos in that fashion. I think most vloggers, and I think the sensible way to do these things would be to record the hands and then do the analysis afterwards. Really think about what you want to say so that way you provide the most value. But I do it like in the moment. I think that's always kind of been my, you know, one of my goals with these vlogs is to capture the essence of the day and capture the story of the day and capture it all as the day unfolds. So whether my eyes are super bloodshot at like 5 in the morning coming out of the Bellagio, or you know, after several beverages with some friendly vlog watching folks at a meetup game, that's what I do. I capture it all. Sometimes it fails me, sometimes I just have to throw in the towel. I ended up playing, as mentioned, until midnight last night. There was a couple of major hands. First one was mostly straightforward. Actually, they're both kind of straightforward, but first one, there was an open and we looked down at pocket aces in the small blind and we 3-bet it. And the big blind rips it all in for $700. So not a whole lot of analysis that's gonna go into this one.
You want to run it twice? Yeah. What are we doing? 2 times.
We run it twice. We're up against pocket queens. We run it twice and we scoop on both boards. So that's a $700 plus uptick, probably closer to 800 with the other dead money in the middle. And then the other hand happened when I called a raise with pocket threes, flop ourselves bottom set on queen 10-3, pretty favorable for us. The initial raiser c-bets it. We go ahead and raise it right away on the flop since we unblock a lot of good hands with bottom set in particular. He's gonna have lots of top pair hands, he's gonna have over pairs, and he's gonna have some draws. We don't block any of that stuff. So he can continue with lots of things, and he does continue on this flop. Turns a great card for our hand, it's another queen, so if he has a queen himself, we're gonna be able to extract a bunch of value now. He check calls again on the turn, and the river is also a fantastic card. It's a 7, which shouldn't change or alter anything. He checks, I bet $525, and he makes the call with pocket aces. So, later on, pocket aces, even though they got cracked earlier, end up making a big difference for us in both ways. We get it in and they hold up, and then we crack them ourselves. So we win a couple of big pots there towards the end. Get into the cash game for a total of $1,700. I believe we cashed out of the game for around $3,350. That's going to be a profit of $1,650. So we rode the roller coaster there in this session. Good times here at Graton Casino as always. Everyone who came by, cheers to you. We also played a tournament earlier today. We had a really good turnout of 74 people when they usually get somewhere around 30. Thanks for being here, guys. On to the next one. Next meetup game will be Maryland Live. It's gonna be another big one. That's if I ever leave this suite. If I have to go back to Vegas, would prefer to just live here though.